Hello everyone and welcome to the grand final of the Champions Chess Tour Julius Baer Challenge. It is Magnus Carlsen versus Alireza Firouzja and this is game 4. Like in the first match where Magnus Carlsen won, okay, there it was a bit more topsy-turvy as first two games had a decisive result, then game 3 ended in a draw, and then it took Magnus game 4 to actually win the match, and then Alireza had to go into the losers bracket of the grand final. There he defeated Levon Aronian, as we've seen in that wonderful game, and now he gets a chance to take a crack at Magnus for a second time. And again, 3 games nothing, and then everything is decided in the 4th game. Well, not nothing. They did play 3 games of pretty much perfect chess. Magnus even says, I thought this was incredibly funny. During the interview, he said that Alireza was winning in game 2, only the engine didn't pick up on it. So, okay, that's a pretty bold statement from Magnus. So Magnus knew that Alireza was winning. It's just that they were playing too fast. The engine didn't realize it. But okay, let's check out game 4. First 3 games ended in a draw. What happened in this one? And now, as you know, Alireza has to win the first match in order to induce the grand final reset, and then he will play another match against Magnus. That's how it works. And if Magnus wins, or if the match is a draw, then Magnus wins the match. So let's check it out. Magnus opens with knight to f3. You can see that he's nearing that 2900 rating. And Alireza also 2878, very nice. We have knight to f6, g3, and pawn to g6. So going for the symmetrical setup, b3 and bishop to g7. We have bishop to b2, Magnus saying that he will fianchetto both of his bishops, d6 and bishop to g2. We have pawn to e5 and pawn to d3. So this is, a nothing opening and everything opening. It's just very, very flexible. You're not rushing into, you're not pushing into a line that you both know up to maybe 25 moves. You just want to play chess and react to your opponent's moves as best as possible. We have castles, pawn to c4 and pawn to a5 by Alireza, knight to c3. And now there are a couple of moves that have been played here, but after pawn to h6, it is now as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. So okay, Magnus castles, we have pawn to c6 and pawn to e4. Closing down the center, and you can see that Alireza already has a backwards d6 pawn, which will kind of be the theme of the game. Magnus does have the Marozzi pawn structure controlling d5, which means that Alireza will be trying to push d5 for the better part of the game. Rook e8, we have rook to e1, knight to a6, and now pawn to h3, controlling the g4 square, bishop to d7, and now Magnus strikes with pawn to d4. He wants the d file opened up to double up, maybe even triple up on the d file, and then really go after that d6 pawn. E captures, we have knight captures, and knight to c5. An excellent square for the knight, as there is no d pawn and b4 cannot be played, so the knight on c5 is very strong, putting pressure on that e4 pawn. We have queen to c2 by Magnus and queen to c8 by Alireza, putting pressure on that h3 pawn. King to h2, Magnus defends, and now knight to g4 check. A beautiful knight sacrifice. I'm only kidding. He's only opening up a discovery towards the knight, so it's a trade. H captures, bishop captures on d4, and now rook 8 to d1, attacking the bishop, and bishop to g7. So both of them playing very, very quick moves. Magnus a little bit better on the clock, and the question is, should Magnus capture the pawn on d6? Well, for the moment, it doesn't seem like it's a very good idea. If you play rook captures on d6 now, then queen to c7, and you might have some problems here. For example, pawn to e5, bishop captures on g4, and that white king could be in a bit of a problem. Maybe it could be played, but there is always time to capture it. It's not like d5 can be played. So Magnus plays pawn to f3 first, defends the pawn on g4, and queen to c7. Alireza defends the pawn on d6. Queen to d2, putting pressure on d6, and bishop to e6 now. And how can now Magnus play it? Can Magnus play queen captures on d6 now? Well, yes, but not really, because after captures and captures, Alireza's plan was pawn to a4, and now the bishop pair attacking the queen side, and this pawn push will be more than enough to well, maybe even seize advantage in this game, because if you play something like pawn to b4, then there's pawn to a3, very, very nasty move. And now after, let's say, you move the bishop, knight to a4, and black's position is really, really strong. The a pawn is really, really strong, and of course Magnus should not allow this, but it's a common theme in many of the lines, especially of the Sicilian, so you do not capture on d6 here. Knight to e2, we have rook e to d8, now defending the pawn, and the bishop captures on g7. King captures, and queen to c3 with check. Pawn to f6 by Alireza. It worked for Magnus in, I believe, game 1, so Alireza also tries it, and it is a very, very strong move. Rook to d2, Magnus again just doubling up on the d file, going after the weakness that is the d6 pawn. Queen to e7, and now rook e to d1. We have bishop to f7 and knight to d4. We have rook to d7, and now Magnus strikes with pawn to f4, and Alireza goes king to g8. Now, you might be thinking, is it okay to capture the pawn on e4? Why is now Magnus allowing this? Well, if you capture, then bishop captures and queen captures, seems like everything is fine, but rook e2 and your queen is trapped, so that's the problem. So king back to g8, we have rook to e2, and now pawn to a4. Alireza finally gets to push this pawn. Pawn to b4 by Magnus, and now Alireza thought for a couple of seconds here, because he's really down on time. He has 1 minute and 34 seconds, and he played knight to a6. And this is where Magnus takes control of the game. Interestingly, the move you have to play, and it is the only move that sort of keeps you in the game, is pawn to a3. And, you know, it made sense in the line that I've shown, but how does it make sense here? Can't you just play b captures on c5? Well, turns out it's not the best move. If you capture it, then d captures on c5, and your rook on d1 is hanging. But it doesn't matter, because knight f5 comes with an attack on the queen, so you're just trading pieces, really. G captures, rook captures on d7, queen captures, and you will play something like rook d2, attack the queen. Once the queen moves, you will even capture the pawn here, and you will have this position where it's equal material, but maybe white is a little bit better. White has a slightly safer king, but then again, it's hard to say. But after b4, Alireza played knight to a6, and now Magnus strikes with pawn to b5. The engine says that knight to c2 is the move you want to play here, because the only counterplay for black is seemingly pawn to c5, and without the knight as a target on d4, black will really struggle to find a single move here. Now, if you play c5, b5, there's no knight to force white to capture, and the position is really bad. You still have the weakness of the d6 pawn. You've grabbed more space here. The knight will have to go back. The rook will have a hard time entering the game. So that's definitely the way to go. But okay, a little time on the clock for Alireza. Magnus wants to capitalize on that. b5, we have c captures, knight captures, and now rook to c8, putting pressure on that c file. Rook e to d2, shifting the attention over to the pawn here, even though you could have defended with by playing rook c8. Alireza really wants to capture on c4, and rook to d4 can be played, but it looks passive, and I'm guessing Magnus was playing on Alireza's time. Rook e to d2, giving up the c4 pawn. Rook captures on c4, and now Magnus should play something like queen to f3, but then Alireza just defends the pawn, and it's very unclear why Magnus sacrificed it. So Magnus played queen to e3, but now the theme of the entire game, that was the weak d6 pawn, is no longer a thing, because Alireza just plays pawn to d5. Magnus's queen on e3 is undefended. You cannot play e captures on d5. But okay, Magnus obviously was expecting this, plays e5. Knight to c7 offers a trade of knights, and Magnus trades. Knight captures, rook c captures on c7, and bishop captures on d5, wins back the pawn. Bishop captures, we have rook captures, and rook captures on d5. Queen to e6, putting pressure on the rook, and queen to d3. And now you have to play, believe it or not, f captures on e5. But Alireza played queen captures on g4, and now Magnus's position is completely winning, but you have to find the correct idea. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. The move, of course, that Alireza missed here was pawn to e6. This is a real shocker, because now if you capture the pawn, the g6 pawn hangs, and there is no defense against the rook to d8. That's all there is. Doesn't matter what you play, rook to d8 will end the game. So here after e6, Alireza tried rook to g7, but it just doesn't work. Now Magnus plays pawn to f5, which says, okay, either you play g captures on f5, or, you know, I just keep my pawn structure, the queen cannot capture. So Alireza must capture, and now rook to d8 with check. Rook to d7 is even stronger, as it kind of leaves black without a move. e7 is coming next, but yeah, I guess also very hard to see. And Alireza down to 8 seconds. Magnus, you know, if he finds something that works, he's not going to look for something that works better. That's you know, that's a very neat way of losing chess games that I myself am very fond of. King h7, we have rook to d7 now, and queen to h5 with check. King to g2, we have queen to g6, now putting some pressure on that g3 pawn, but it doesn't matter. Magnus just trades, rook captures, queen captures, and now queen to d7. And of course, there's no way to play this, but Alireza manages to poison the position a little bit, as Magnus is also below the 10-second mark, and he plays pawn to f4. Now, you can't really trade. That's a problem, because then king captures and the king stops the passed pawn. You can't really advance the pawn, because now queen captures and g3 is a thing. So what can you play? Well, best is actually king to f1, and black is without a move. But those are moves that obviously don't come to mind with a few seconds on the clock. Magnus played pawn to g4 because the black queen is pinned, but now Alireza just plays f5 and again stops pawn to e7, but Magnus says, no, you don't stop pawn to e7, I don't mind queen to g4 check. And this looks like surely there's a draw here somewhere, but okay, Magnus plays it. We have queen captures and g4, king to f2, queen to g3 check, king to e2, and now pawn to f3 with check. King to e3, king to d3 is still winning for Magnus, but after king to e3, he allows Alireza to draw the game, but Alireza misses it. Alireza plays pawn to f2 check. The way to draw this is queen to e1 check. Point being that you cannot go to the d file, as queen d1 just wins the queen, so you can either play king to f4, which runs into queen e4, or you capture and then you just get checkmated. Queen g1, queen h1, queen g1, queen, and so on and so on. Point being that you cannot touch the d file. But Alireza played pawn to f2 with check, and the game is once again winning for Magnus. King to e2, queen to e5 with check, king captures on f2, and queen to f4 with check. And now it's merely a matter of avoiding all the checks, and Magnus is able to find safety, but he has to march his king up the board. Queen e3 check, king b4, queen b6 check, king c4, queen a6 check, king c5, queen a5 check, king d6, queen to b6 with check, king e5, queen e3 check, and king to f6. Queen g5 check. Now Magnus should never go to f7. If he goes to f7, he just gets checkmated, so that would be a bit of an issue, but he just goes back. King to e6, we have queen to g6 check, king d5, queen to g2 check, king to c5, and queen to f2 check, king to b5, queen to b2 check, king a5, and now queen to c3 with check. Of course, Alireza knows that this is dead lost, but you know, it's seconds on the clock, and the mouse slips are a thing, so he has to try everything. Queen b4 check, king to c7, and queen to a5 check. King b8, queen e5 check, king to c7, queen to c7, and he was in this position on move 71 that Alireza Firouzja resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. You cannot trade, because then the passed d pawn, e pawn is just winning. You cannot move the queen to avoid the queen trade, because then this pawn just marches forward. For example, you play something like queen e6, then you bring a queen into the game with a discovery, and that's just it. You have to play something, and you get checkmated. So yeah, after queen to c7, Alireza resigned, and a brilliant victory for Magnus Carlsen, who wins yet another tournament. He is the winner of the Julius Baer Generation Cup of the Champions Chess Tour, and he will be playing in the finals in his home country of Norway. And yeah, you know, he didn't just beat Alireza in the grand final, he did it twice. He beat him once and then once again. So yeah, it's gonna be a while, it seems, until someone takes down Magnus Carlsen. He is the absolute best, and as he says, or rather as I wanted to show you guys what he said during the interview, I thought I updated the quote above the board. He said, "I'm not too good at chess if you compare to perfect play, but I am a little bit better than others." And he seems to be proving that that is the case. So yeah, great game by both of them. Great match by both of them. The first match was incredible. Second match was incredible. Magnus was, better by only a little bit, but that is enough. It seems that when Alireza plays someone, Alireza crushes them. When Magnus plays someone, Magnus crushes them. When they play each other, Magnus is just a little bit better, at least this time. We'll see what happens in the next one. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and a little bit of extra info about the event. Magnus won first place and $30,000. Alireza second place and $20,000. So basically, this game was also for the extra $10,000. Even though I don't think either of them really need the money, it's always nice to get an extra $10,000. I hope you agree. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Grandmaster Uncle Moves Only, Ranko Djogašević, Nishan Travi, GrznChessFestival.org.gg, and Miguel Faber for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.